Kia ora koutou and welcome to our second week Wellington Regional Leadership Committee Thought Leadership webinar with Dr. Tom Logan. Please note this is being recorded. So I wanted to begin with a karakia timatanga. Mori oho, mori tu, mori ora, kia tatou, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. So thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have Tom speaking, and I hope you will make the most of the Q&A discussion with him at the end. So first, I'll give a quick overview of the Leadership Committee for those who are less familiar with us. The Leadership Committee was formed under the Urban Growth Agenda, a government-wide program acknowledging that business as usual, the old way of working in silos, on an area in isolation is no longer enough when it comes to fixing the bigger issues we're facing. In fact, it can even exacerbate them. So the committee is a partnership of leaders in central government, councils and iwi in the Wellington, Wairarapa, Horowhenua region to work collaboratively to address our region's cross-boundary growth-related issues. Our goal, work cooperatively to positively shape our region's future, to build a place where our kids can enjoy playing outdoors, we have access to nature, breathing clean air, have healthy, warm homes, and feel part of a safe and thriving community. And we want our decisions today to stand up to the scrutiny of future generations. So on the slide, you can see our 5 key interdependent areas of work: transport, housing, the environment, iwi capacity, and the economy. These are also interdependent across all iwi, mana whenua, and councils of the region, and no one can solve these alone. There's shared problems and shared opportunities, but they're not shared evenly. Our only option is to work collaboratively for shared outcomes. This is a new and constantly evolving way to how we've worked in the past in the region, but it's exciting to build communities of practice for all of us to share our approaches, our resources, and our wisdom for the greater good. We're on this call because we all want to contribute to the solutions. And knowing the best pathway to take through the complexity of our region's issues invites us to be curious, coachable, integrative, and responsive to all parts of the system of which we're all an integral part. So these webinars are to connect us, keep the conversations going, hear from the experts, and learn together. So it is my pleasure to introduce today's thought leader, Dr. Tom Logan, speaking on integrated planning, finding co-benefits for sustainability, resilience, health, and equity. So a quick intro, Tom is a lecturer in civil systems engineering at University of Canterbury, and he's also the technical director for Urban Intelligence Limited, a research consultancy. His PhD from the University of Michigan focused on risk and resilience of communities. Through his work, he looks to adapt our towns and cities to climate change and works to achieve this to enhance co-benefits and synergies to ensure our communities become more resilient, sustainable, healthy, and equitable. And Tom also recently was the successful recipient of a 1 million MB Smart Idea grant to support research in partnership with Christchurch City Council into understanding and adapting to the risk of climate change. So I'll hand over to you, Tom.
So, thank you very much for inviting me. So tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko opoku te maunga tiru ni taku nikau. Ko atakaro te awa e mahia ni aku maharara. No a hariri aho, ko Tom Logan taku ingoa. So as I said, I grew up in Napier, a city once transformed by a disaster. And while I didn't recognize it at the time, the city rebuilt and was shaped quite differently as a result. A few years later, I moved to Christchurch to study civil and natural resources engineering, only to experience part of that, a similar disaster myself. And what we experienced and observed in 2011, and even to a small extent today, has been studied intensively around the world and New Zealand. What we saw was this huge coming together of a community in the wake of a disaster, the social cohesion, we saw what's called bridging social capital, that is, connections between people who are not like you in a demographic sense. What we saw was that suddenly students weren't the enemy of the people, but rather were an integral part of the community. And how we design our cities fosters social cohesion and the ability to develop that social capital. But what frustrated me during my studies was that we as engineers were never really taught to ask why, to challenge the predetermined solution. It seemed that the engineer was approached only to provide the technical design for a pre-identified solution. They were never asked to step back and consider the system. So I was awarded a Fulbright to study a master's at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And of course, while I was there was a disaster, only of a different kind. The protests and riots arose due to racial inequality. In 2015, the Black Lives Matter protests in Baltimore began following the killing of 25-year-old Freddie Gray. How we design our cities affects racial injustice. The US has key injustices which have arisen over several decades following white flight, where whites left for the suburbs and blacks were burdened with deserted and increasingly dangerous neighborhoods, poor schooling, pollution, and deteriorating infrastructure. American home loans were only available to whiter areas. The street network was designed in a way to reduce connectivity between white and black neighborhoods. How we design our cities affects racial injustice. I then moved to Michigan, Ann Arbor, to study my PhD and focused on the intersection of risk and urban science. While there, I, of course, witnessed another disaster. This was the election of Donald Trump. It was a reaction in part to the rising socio-economic inequalities in the US and an erosion of trust in government. How we design our cities plays a role in those issues as well. So I moved back to New Zealand only to find ourselves globally confronting another disaster. And in this case, we had one of the best responses. But what we saw was that our response also eroded due to misinformation and distrust, chipping away at our community's resilience. And what we see in this systems map behind us is a system map of COVID and of that risk of transmission. And key in this, although what we're thinking about is up in this corner, risk of transmission, which is the epidemiological term, it's trust in authorities, which sits over in this corner, that played a major role in terms of effectiveness of health communication, perception of perceived risk, and public performance of protective behaviours. Today, we live in a world that is increasingly specialised, but simultaneously more connected. Our faults and our challenges today have largely arisen because we've ignored these connections. Consider engineering. We've become specialised necessarily in order to address the challenges such as earthquake engineering and finer details around things like structural design. But this specialisation has come at a cost. We've lost the ability to step back and consider the system, that true understanding of how things fit together. In the 19th century, an interdisciplinary team of engineers, planners, and health professionals realized that cholera, typhoid, and diphtheria, and other diseases were caused by how we design our cities. They thought about the system. They identified changes in the built environment that eradicated or built out the disease. But as we've grown more specialized, we've lost that systems thinking. As I said, our world is not only more specialized, but more connected. These issues are unique compared to those of the past because of those increasingly complex interconnections in the scale. So you'll often hear these referred to as wicked problems. These are the problems that demand a holistic approach for finding solutions that integrate multiple disciplines and cultural perspectives. We need to think about climate change, injustices, the housing crisis, sustainability, health, and economic vibrancy. All of these are related because they arise from how we plan our cities. The good news is that we can address many of the challenges simultaneously. The bad news is that if we don't think about them as part of the system, we can exacerbate the issues. So it's with that integrated thinking that we can really maximize the synergies. So consider the housing crisis, sustainability and health, and our community's vibrancy. The key is density and diversity. The famous planner, Jane Jacobs, described the ballet of the street, the complex composition of a diversity of people using the street in various ways. Such disorderly order enables our neighborhoods to thrive and make us safe. People, day and night, using and supporting the city in their unique ways. Beyond the benefits to our economy and our community are benefits to sustainability and public health by reducing vehicle trips. Benefits through more efficient use of infrastructure, rather than using it just during the day at work and then not using that same infrastructure throughout the night. There's also benefits for housing. The key to achieving this density and diversity is mixed-use development, residential alongside or above retail in main activity centres. But our choices are often limited by how our cities are designed. Councils and governments can no longer blame personal behaviour when we're provided a false choice. A council or government that consents or fast tracks, as we're seeing recently, sprawling development or roads that induce unsustainable demand are not recognising the climate emergency that many of them have declared. Instead, they must provide the infrastructure and opportunity so we have real freedom. In doing so, we can simultaneously address our cities and revitalise our community centres. Our urban planning also needs to depart from the mentality around anchor projects that has arisen following the Christchurch earthquakes. Stadiums and pool complexes, as we're seeing in Nainai and New Brighton, will provide infrequent pulses of activity, but leave the area quiet and airy once it's closed after hours. This long-term sustainability is achieved by the diversity of multiple users and multiple uses, including residential. People are the key to that vibrant, safe neighbourhood. In thinking about New Brighton, they're actually starting to think about this in their master plan, where we've got this idea of a new area where there will be mixed-use residential, there will be commercial, there will be activities so everyone can walk and bike. And much as I love this idea, and it's great to see this concept being recognised in a master plan, what they failed to do was think about the wider system and recognise that New Brighton is at severe risk from climate change. And so this is showing the risk from coastal flooding in blue and groundwater flooding in purple, and showing the roads and how vulnerable they are under these conditions. And it's not good enough for the developer to say, oh, well, we're increasing the floor height of our buildings and our houses. Because we know that everything is connected, we know that there are indirect risks, and one of those indirects is isolation. So even if your home is high and dry, if you can't access things that you need, if you can't access school, your infrastructure is damaged, then you're not going to be able to live there in the long term. So our research is looking at ways for this integration of thinking. The Spatial Planning Act is also a key and important step in this direction. It enables urban designers and urban planners to be more strategic and more holistic. But on the other hand, we're also seeing Three Waters reform, which is valuable in many ways. But we must ensure that we don't see a silosation of our water infrastructure, meaning that decisions are not made thinking about transport, land use, and community. What is critical is that councils do their best to connect between the silos and break down the silos within their organizations, such as what you guys are doing, which is why it's so awesome to see. At the University of Canterbury, I was hired as part of a new team 3 years ago. So there were 3 of us hired into the system, or into the group, which is called Civil Systems. And so new civil engineering graduates are coming out thinking about sustainability, resilience, maladaptation, the potential for inadvertent impacts from seemingly well-intentioned changes. And they're thinking about environmental justice and ethics. We need to appreciate in our planning and in our councils that there are not only major social benefits, environmental benefits, and cultural benefits from an integrated approach to this, but there are major cost savings as well due to the co-benefits and synergies. As I've said, how we design our towns and cities matters. And for it to address the challenges of climate, health, safety, and the economy, we need to step back and think about the system. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tom. That sparked a lot of ideas and inspiration for me. So I think now the really exciting part of the presentation is the Q&A. So I wonder if you've got an example, just put you right on the spot, of sort of going into a context maybe with local government, central government, where you've encountered resistance to some of these ideas, and sort of what their rationale was, and perhaps how you were able to bring people around to thinking more holistically.
Yeah, I think one of the key examples is the New Brighton development.
Right.
And like I said, there are so many things that I love about the plan, but just doesn't make sense from a climate perspective. But of course, there are huge issues that we just don't have the support from central government yet. Like, we can't simply abandon the people and say, oh, sorry, we're not going to develop there because of climate change, and then literally leave them to it. So there has to be a thinking around it. But the residents that I've talked to in New Brighton feel like a massive whiplash, because on one hand, they need to be thinking about retreating and about defending themselves from climate change. And on the other hand, the council's building new infrastructure and new amenities and new, and so it's, I think they find it really confusing. So the way that we've addressed this, and this is part of the work in our climate space with the City Council, is that we've developed the system which pulls together all of their information about hazards and all of their information about their assets and their infrastructure. And instead of just saying like where the hazards are, it says so what. And so we're getting to the point where the council is integrating the system in our research, so that it's the one point of it's a single source of information, and it draws on all of the other pulls all the other information together so that people can rely on it for their land use planning decisions, their asset management decisions, thinking about hazards, thinking about the long-term adaptation of those areas. So while that discussion around New Brighton in particular is still particularly thorny, it's been really positive seeing people in the council using the same idea, thinking about these indirect risks like isolation. We're seeing the council starting to pull that into their long-term planning decisions, and I think like that's really cool, connecting the dots.
Nice. Yeah. I'm also curious about your practice, urban intelligence. I'm just sort of curious what things you're excited about in your practice, your team, and if there's anything coming on the horizon that you can share with us with that, or, or is it for next year? Yeah.
Well, we set up I never really saw myself as working for a company, let alone leading one, because I always kind of felt that the work that I was interested in wasn't something that anyone would pay for, because it was more holistic and but it's really nice. We started doing research with the council, and one of the first things I did when I got into New Zealand was approach them and say, how can we help with your climate adaptation? And they said, basically, we're just starting and we would love if you would help us with this. And so we started doing that in a research capacity and quickly realized that while the university encourages us to make an impact, it's hard to have the capacity to teach and do research and also be like really good, reliable partners for councils when obviously there are things that need to be done within certain timelines and fixes and like so to have that capacity and to have that reliable support. I hired a couple of people to support me, and then it made sense to transition. So urban intelligence exists essentially as a way of bridging the research and the practice, and we're really excited about our climate work. We're working with Hawke's Bay Regional Council, with Bulla District Council, and working on pulling accessibility into that, and thinking about how we address the Spatial Planning Act requirements of accessibility, which is asking, we need to make sure we're building in place or developing or intensifying in places that aren't at risk from hazards, that are, where possible, utilising existing infrastructure nearby main activity centres to reduce emissions. So we're trying to pull in all of these things to provide like a planning support tool that says, preferably don't go here, and incentivize or encourage development in these areas. So like I said, pulling all of those kind of information together, and it's just been really cool seeing different parts of the Christchurch City Council say, hey, this could be really useful. And I think that's like the key to breaking those silos, because Christchurch is such a big organisation.
Right. Yeah. I love what you said about sort of the cost of specialization. It was so well intended, but it came at that cost of sort of stepping back and seeing our connections. And I love that you were so proactive and just went to the council and said, can we help? And I think proactivity is something that let's encourage, because we might think the idea I've got isn't good enough, I won't share it. And in actual fact, 1,000 other people are thinking it. And yeah, so I'm excited about seeing people have the concept of systems thinking and integrated planning introduced to them. And it sounds like you're absolutely leading the way in terms of it's so true, the unintended cost of not thinking that way is just so much greater than the cost of doing it well. We have a question. Pavati.
Hi, Tom. Nice to meet you. Thank you for your talk. I work with Freda in the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee, project lead for the Future Development Strategy, which is obviously very relevant to the stuff you're working on. My question's about your spin-off article, I think it was, about the 10-Minute City Urban Intelligence app kind of thing, which was really cool to see. I just wondered if you had any feedback from that article, from like you kind of in this audience, you kind of preach to the converted about this kind of thing. Did you get any feedback from community or people that may be less knowledgeable about this space or really or believe in this work? Kind of keen to hear if you could, yeah.
Well, I had two on both sides of the spectrum. I had a really positive radio interview this morning with Pacific Radio in Auckland, and they just thought they were thinking about the value of urban design that encourages and enhances community, and how important that is for Pacifica communities. And I thought that was really, really cool, and how we think about our urban design and accessibility. And I guess the jump that I'm missing there is that accessible cities such as the 10-minute or 15-minute city means that there are more people walking around and, of course, interacting with the people that live like their neighbours. On the other end of the spectrum, I had someone email me and say, that they live in a relatively dense area, but they really hate it because there's so many cars and they can't bike because of the cars. That makes them feel unsafe. And this is really a big challenge for us because it's a chicken and egg situation where we need density to support amenities. But without the amenities, then we're developing essentially car-dependent density. And so that we're seeing a lot of that in Christchurch, where for some reason we're not putting people in the very, very inner city. And instead they're popping up along main roads, like 3 or 4 story apartments along main roads. And of course, then everyone has their car because they have to use it to get anywhere. So I think her comments were really highlighting to me that there is a massive challenge, and the density that's being done poorly is making the challenge harder to communicate to people that there are benefits from this kind of design.
Well, thanks for that, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
Question from Aria Franklin, who's actually the project lead for our regional emissions reduction strategy. She's asked, what are your thoughts on transport and spatial planning being done together from an emissions reduction perspective?
Cool. So that's actually the Exponent City dashboard that was mentioned earlier. We're building emissions reduction and VKT and public transport into that, so we can see how and test new development. So this is research that we're doing at the moment to say if we build a new centre here or do density in this way, or a new housing development here, for example, in Lincoln, which we've been thinking about working with the Selwyn District Council. What impact will that have on emissions? And I think the emissions reduction plan is requiring us to think about and report on those kind of things. So what are my thoughts on transport and spatial planning being done together? 100% absolutely. It's part and parcel. I guess the other thing that I will add to that is research that I'm really excited to do is that we're extending the Exponent City analysis we did for the 42 urban areas in New Zealand and the 500 largest cities in the US. Mm-hmm. And we're currently getting data for Australia, Asian, Canadian, European cities to see how those associations change and really identifying best practices in our urban design around the world, and using machine learning to identify, to essentially mine that data to see how urban topologies and street network types and densities relate to emissions and accessibility and car dependence. So that's what we're working on at the moment. So I'm kind of bubbling to that.
We'll book you in for the webinar on that one. That sounds intimidatingly huge and yet essential. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, so it helps.
Oh my gosh. This explains the whiteboard behind you.
Yeah. Don't. This is bad, so you don't want to sneak any more of a preview into my what goes on up here.
Yeah, that'll be the next technology. So has anyone got any other burning questions or comments for Tom while we have his in mind? I guess we've come to time, unless there's anything else you want to say, Tom, because I know these webinars, you sort of come together and you share great ideas and then you go away and what changes. So I don't know if you've got sort of the top 3 or the top 5 things people could take away for some things to think about.
One thing that I might as well take the opportunity to say is that I'm writing a research grant on multi-criteria land use planning, so that integrated spatial planning. And if there was an opportunity to partner with anyone up in the region, that would be really cool and would strengthen the research grant. And so that's a 3-year project that, if successful, would start late next year. But if anyone is interested, please reach out, because the whole point of my research is to have that those partnerships to make sure that it's actually useful for you guys and what you're trying to achieve and what you're doing. So yeah, if there is any opportunities to partner or work together on that, or the climate adaptation or accessibility, please reach out, because that would be awesome.
Thank you. I think that's really exciting, and I think that I love that you're walking the talk of we need to lean into our connections, because we are all active players in the solution, whether or not we see that. So I will make sure that we can give your email to people. Yeah, I think that sounds like an amazing opportunity. I think that bridge between academia and sort of in local government, as you say, is got so many benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think it's underutilized in a lot of ways. And I wanted to be like an academic that wasn't just sitting on the sideline criticizing, but actually supporting and being involved and
rolling your sleeves up. And
yeah, honestly, it's the best part of my best part of my work, and having an impact is the whole point. So
hopefully, yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. We're very lucky to have you. Yeah, it's very relevant to the leadership committee's work, really. So I, for one, am very excited about it, and I'm sure you're going to get hit up for collaboration. So that was a really excellent discussion. Thank you so much, Tom. And I hope that we'll be sort of stay connected, and yeah, just absolutely brilliant. And congratulations on your work, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Congratulations to you guys for being leaders on the connecting the space. Yeah, no, it's awesome to see from down here. So
oh, cool, excellent, wonderful. We'll let you get on with your day and all your phone calls from radio stations.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom.